As consumers, we are bombarded by it at every turn, like the Incredible Hulk being bombarded by gamma rays. But what makes some media endure, while others are banished to the forgotten black hole of obscurity, never to be heard from again? Who or what decides this? Hetero life mates Steve and Yahel want to know, and they want to know now. This is Obscurity Now. Hi, this is Obscurity Now, the only podcast about obscure media. The only thing better than obscure media is women. Don't you agree, my ethnic friend who might die in a car crash someday? Or airplane crash?
Sorry, I was too busy trying all 32 flavors of women to...
Well played, sir. Well played.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to the Obscurity Now podcast. I'm Steve Gaines. And
Your hair does look darker, Steve. I was going to ask if...
I was actually going to... I should... There, let me get really
there
into
you go.
It. Yeah. That just looks terrible.
Now, tell me about your Australian father and how he swam your family to L.A.
Yeah. Why would you move? All right, if you're an Olympic swimmer and coach in Australia, why would you move to the U.S., Yahel? Why would you move to the U.S.?
I don't know. Don't know.
All right, if you're puzzled as to what we're talking about, let me clear it up for you. We're discussing rock legend Chris Gaines. Now, there's a lot of speculation that Chris Gaines might actually be Garth Brooks in disguise. I mean, I find that highly preposterous. It's an urban legend, really. Like, remember when kids used to say that the dude from the Wonder Years was Marilyn Manson, but it wasn't true? Yeah. Chris Gaines is his own man.
I mean, from what I understand, there's like 20 years worth of albums.
Right.
Chris Gaines put out.
But for some reason, only the greatest hits is ever really available to listen to. And another thing, for some reason, there's only 2 songs to listen to on YouTube that I could find.
Huh.
Yeah.
That is very weird. Well, I did notice that there was and I don't know why he brought it up, but for some reason, Garth Brooks, 2 years ago, he said that he's got that there's 5 more Chris Gaines albums to put out. I don't know how he would have this inside information.
I know
why he would say this, why he would blurt this out. Maybe he's good friends.
I think I see what's going on here. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, Garth Brooks was like the biggest thing in the 90s, maybe next to like the Spice Girls or something.
Pogs.
Yeah, next to Pogs
and Garth Brooks.
Exactly.
And if you had a Garth Brooks Pog, you just found the 33rd flavor.
I mean, you would have to beat off women with a stick if you had that Garth Brooks Pog. Exactly. With your actual Pog collection. You'd have to take the tube of Pogs and be like, get away, woman, get away. But all right, so Garth Brooks was a huge country singer. And all right, obviously, Chris Gaines started to rise in popularity. And he could see the writing on the wall. He was about to get usurped in the the billboards or whatever by this young up-and-comer Chris Gaines. So basically, he did a little some shady dealings and made it so Chris Gaines went away after like one album of greatest hits, or after a couple of albums, and then also made it so his movie deal wouldn't work out.
Yeah. I mean, it's I'm more of a fan of Crush anyway. Chris Gaines' previous.
Oh, you mean the punk band Crush?
Yeah. Those guys were so punk. Steve, did you know that when they went to go shoot their first music video, they just got there and just refused to do anything?
Yeah. Oh man, they're so edgy, so in your face. But what I like,
why even show up? Yeah. If that's your plan to not do anything.
But what I truly appreciated, Yahel, was on the cover for their first album. I don't exactly remember the title, but if you look real closely, if you squint, you can see a young Chris Gaines. His hands are in his pockets, but his middle fingers are out. Ho, 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 ho. Man. Oh, man.
Take that, the man.
Yeah. And then he even says in this documentary, which we're about to discuss, that the finger wasn't to anyone in particular except for the system. Oh man,
that's what it is. The system.
What a rebel! Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So,
and I don't know. I think System Shock's a pretty good game.
I didn't even know it was out back then. It was great. Or you know what?
I don't know if the timing's
perhaps right. Was he talking about System of a Down? Was he against them too? Oh wow.
Oh, maybe. Maybe it's the System 32 folder in Windows. Who knows?
Wow, that's specific. I like it. If
that one's for you 32-bit Windows 95 Windows users, like Windows XP and earlier.
Aficionados, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a lot.
If you've got Windows 3.11 for workgroups, you've come to the right podcast.
Yeah, this episode is for people who are like stuck in the most obscure corner of the 90s, listening to Chris Gaines and surfing the internet using Windows XP and earlier. So shall we jump in a little? What's up?
Yeah, I feel like this is like pretty obscure.
Oh yeah.
So we probably should explain a little bit.
Yeah. I say let's do it. Here we go.
Welcome to your feature presentation.
This topic is so obscure that I was gonna say that it scared away our audience, which is usually.
But your sister's here.
Well, my sister showed up. Yes, this would be the kind of thing she would show up for sure. So
hey, Historic Nerd is here. Thanks for joining, Ian. Your sister just said me. I think that was. I guess she remembers it, but Chris Gaines. But Ian said, don't forget the Chris Gaines hidden bonus tracks on the CD.
Oh man,
is that a thing?
I mean, this is really the first I've heard of it. It was never mentioned in this very detailed documentary that we're about to cover. Did you ever uncover any hidden CDs back when you collected? Well, or not CDs, but any hidden tracks on your CDs? What did you find?
Oh, I don't remember any off the top of my head, but I mean, when you it was always pretty easy because if your CD player told you the length of the track, and if it was like a 20-minute track or something, and the song ended in 4 minutes, I mean, you knew there was something coming, but I can't remember any off the top of my head.
Well, I'll go while you think about it. I had the cassette of the that Offspring album that everyone had, and if you let the last track play, there's like a version of Come Out and Play, which is just an instrumental that basically just sounds like Middle Eastern music, like they were actually playing just the sitar track. Yeah, it's pretty.
Maybe Chris Gaines should sing over that one.
I agree. He should. He just
come out and play.
He adds gains. Hey, come out and play.
Come out and play.
But the next one that I discovered is I had a They Might Be Giants CD, and this one I think I found out about it from their website. You actually had to start the first track and then press back on it, so it's actually like a minus. It looks like it's going on the CD dial, and there's a little song there as well.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, I feel like every Chris Gaines song is a bonus track.
I thought you were going to say is a hidden track because
yeah, that too.
Strangely enough, no one's talking about him except for us.
Yeah, and Garth Brooks, who all right, spoiler alert, everyone, Chris Gaines is Garth Brooks.
No, I refuse to believe it. I've got evidence to support otherwise, like this entire documentary we're going to go over, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, it was wild to me that he did this, because he created this Chris Gaines character at the height of his popularity, and it's, I mean, in a way, I applaud him for being so audacious and bold to being like, I want to create a pop album, and I'm going to create this whole crazy backstory. And Garth Brooks did actually write the backstory for Chris Gaines.
Oh, I believe it.
He didn't write any of the songs, though, on the album. Did you know that?
I did not know that. I know that one of them is kind of like a cover. Like, that's the one that I listened to. And the other one, I wasn't sure who wrote it. It wasn't a cover. The one that I listened to that has a video for it, it's the Smile on Your Brother, that song.
Sure, I remember that song vividly in high school. We all loved it. all of his gainers. That's what us Chris Gaines fans call ourselves, the gainers.
I prefer to call my sect of the Chris Gaines universe the Gainiacs, the Chris Gainiacs. um, but yeah, no, I mean, you know that original song. It's like a '70s song. I mean, maybe your parents didn't drive around listening to it, but mine sure did.
I've heard it before.
But okay, all right. I'm going to entertain the idea that Garth Brooks created Chris Gaines, although I'm not exactly 100% sold on it. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, I submit this to you, Yahel. Like, what if Estancia would have gotten bigger than Crush, and then Andy, I don't know, quit for some reason, because obviously he was the one with like most of the talent first, and then and all of a sudden the eye was on you, and then like you went solo, and you got huge, like Garth Brooks huge. Would you like? Is there a specific genre of music you'd be like, I really want to dabble in this, and I really need to create a character to go along with it? Is that how?
Maybe like old standards, like Frank Sinatra, those kind of songs. Like that'd be like a fun thing to do, and you could create like a crooner character.
Do you watch? I think you should leave. Do you watch?
I tried it. I couldn't get into it, man. I didn't think it was funny.
Oh, man. Everyone I know thinks that's funny. Even the comedians I work with think it's funny. But, oh, well. No big deal. So, all right.
Thank you for letting it slide. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll allow it. I mean, any fan of Chris Gaines is like a brother in arms over here. So, all right. So, yeah, basically, as Yahel said, maybe... allegedly, Chris Gaines is the creation of Garth Brooks, and and what we're watching here is Behind the Life of Chris Gaines, which is a mockumentary or rock documentary about the life of Chris Gaines, and which is basically
it's the people that make Behind the Music, they just made a Behind the Music episode for Chris Gaines, and like sometimes the Behind the Music episodes would have like their own like alternate titles. Sometimes it would just be Behind the Music Metallica or whoever. But yeah, this is, if you don't know that Garth Brooks like is this person, you could easily be fooled into thinking that this is a real musician you never heard of. You'd be wondering what happened, how I've never heard of this person, because it is super detailed, the backstory, and I know we're going to get into it in more detail as we go along, but it's super detailed, and they talk a lot about how he had like this band before and like 20 years of albums that have been put out and blah, blah, blah. And they created like a bunch of like, they took so many pictures of Garth Brooks, like in so many outfits and with so many different looks. And they did a great job of making it look like, wow, this is a guy that's been around for a long time. They even, have pictures of him in his quote unquote youth. It's an actor.
Yeah, I love how his face is usually always obscured, no matter what picture.
Yeah,
he's got hair.
Well, they've got a few pictures like from when he's younger. But I love the explanation as to why his face looks different now.
Right.
What happened, Steve? Why doesn't Chris Gaines, modern day Chris Gaines, look like he did when he was younger?
Oh, well, he got in a very vicious car accident, which like before I watched this and dove really deep into Christery, let's call it that. Before I dove into the Christery of it all, I just assumed that they would go with the obvious, because when you hear that a rock musician or celebrity got into a car accident, it's usually the reason usually
because they were drunk.
Yes, exactly. But see, that's the interesting thing about Chris Gaines, is that he's supposed to.
That's not his addiction.
Exactly. That's the thing, is that Chris Gaines is supposed to be like this edgy, like, and he kind of looks like. Actually, to me, who does he look like to you? Who does he look like to you?
I don't have anybody in particular that I can like pinpoint. He does look familiar though for some reason as Chris Gaines.
For a while, like, all right, I was really scratching my noodle, and then I think I figured
Trent
it out.
Reznor?
Yes, you got it. Because I remember I would go over to my my friend's house in middle school, and his older brother had all this wacky, music stuff on the walls, and one of them is that picture of Trent Reznor like this with his hair all down and stuff. So when you look at Chris Gaines, you think his music is going to be, maybe some sort of like edgy industrial, maybe if you saw a picture of him in the later 2000s, you were like, oh, this guy's like totally emo. But then when you listen to it, it's just the most like basic.
It's the most, like very benign pop music.
Yeah, Beatles influenced, I mean, you can. I meant to look up to see how old like Garth Brooks was when all this Chris Gaines stuff was going around, but it seems like he missed like the punk and like new wave like era of music, because all of his like pop stuff just sounds very, like late 60s, early 70s, like dad rock, basically. Maybe not even dad,
yeah, for sure.
Mom and dad rock.
I do want to point out, we've got in the chat, Ian, Historic Nerd, mentioned how he just remembered how it all crumbled when he, aka Garth Brooks, fell in love with Mango. And
what a reference.
That's so what he's, it's a great reference. So Garth Brooks at one point hosted Saturday Night Live.
We talked about this,
and the musical guest was Chris Gaines. And there was a sketch with Mango, Chris Kattan character. Right. He also mentioned in reference to when you were saying who does he look like, he said the lead singer of just about every alternative band from between 1990 and 1999.
Yeah.
And I could definitely see that. I could
see him like singing lead for Creed. Like, but it's sad. Even Creed sounds edgier than Chris Gaines.
100%. Hey, I gotta be honest. Creed, they've got a couple bangers, as the kids would say.
I mean,
Bullets is pretty good.
I mean, I can't give. The only one I know is "With Arms Wide Open."
Maybe we should do a Creed deep dive.
Oh God, no way, man! The reason, or maybe you could say that a couple of Creed songs are decent, but they were played so much in the '90s that I despise them. Like, I can't stand listening to a Creed song. They were being played everywhere. Like, I just couldn't take it any longer. But
similar to Garth Brooks, who was also played everywhere. He was huge. I'm not a country music fan, but I do like quite a few of his songs. I think he's a good songwriter.
Yeah, I mean, I was vehemently against country music in the 90s. I've at least country pop. Like, I've at least tried to listen to it with like an open ear, if you will, like in the in the present, but I don't know. Like, it's just not the right kind of energy for me. Like, I just don't know what to do to it.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
Yeah.
By the way, he was 37 when he did the Chris Gaines character.
Okay, so that makes sense.
Yeah. Should we dive into the mockumentary?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about.
Did you have some?
I just want to talk
Garth
about
facts
behind the music real quick, and then if you've got Garth facts, I would love to hear them. Basically, VH1's Behind the Music ran from 1997 to 2021, 275 episodes, 20 seasons in all. And this particular, it's weird. If you go onto the wiki for Behind the Music, they don't even really count this as a real episode. Like, this plus a few others are kind of considered like their own, I guess, self-contained thing. I mean, because obviously, since it's possibly not real, I guess they didn't want to count it. And this particular episode, Behind the Life of Chris Gaines, premiered November 24th, 1999. What's your thoughts on Behind the Music?
First of all, I do want to say hello to Smoke Monster, who's here. He said he said he hates country music so much with all his heart.
All
so
right, you're in the right spot.
Another brother in arms for you. So I loved Behind the Music. I watched it pretty much religiously, even if it was on a band or a musician that I didn't care about. Mm-hmm. It was usually, really interesting, and it was really well put together from what I remember.
Sure. Were you like me? Did you watch it and be like, oh yeah, that's how my life's gonna be when I get older and join a band? Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be me doing snorting ants, just like Ozzy Osbourne did.
I remember that.
Yeah, I think it's actually on the Motley Crue behind the music that they talk about that. I think Nikki Sixx is telling the story of when they first met Ozzy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like behind the music. I don't remember watching this though when it aired.
No, I didn't.
I knew like Chris Gaines was Garth Brooks, like because I remember it wasn't like a secret. Like Entertainment Tonight and those kind of shows. I mean, they would talk about it, about how this was like his next project or whatever.
Right.
But the whole idea was that there was going to be a movie called The Lamb, and it was going to be produced by Paramount, the makers of Star Trek.
And Mission Impossible.
Yeah, I guess. So anyways, The Lamb was going to be, it was going to star Garth Brooks, and the character he was going to play was going to be Chris Gaines. So it was going to be about this like rock star who had like this crazy life, and he died and under questionable circumstances. So all this Chris Gaines stuff was kind of to the behind the music, the SNL appearance, the album that was put out. It was all like done ahead of the movie to like start promoting it.
Right.
And it's a pretty unique way to like promote a movie. Now the albums ended up going double platinum, which is good. Sure. It's actually great. However, it was way less than they were expecting to sell. And overall, generally, the public had like a pretty lukewarm reaction to the whole concept, and also to a lot of I guess the album itself. It was reviewed kind of middle of the road to good, but not like, oh, this is a masterpiece.
Right.
Or anything.
Well, I mean, and that's what I could say about Chris Gaines, like overall, is that again he looks edgy, and you think he's going to have, maybe like a backstory similar to, you mentioned Motley Crue, like one of those guys. But, you could tell he wanted to have some edge, but he just couldn't go far enough. Like, you could tell he didn't want to have anything to do with drugs and alcohol, which, I mean, pretty much that's synonymous with the typical rock star lifestyle that he's kind of emulating or borrowing from, whatever you want to say. And I think even worse comes in the music, where, as we said, it's the most generic sounding pop you could possibly imagine. I actually when Vanilla Ice went new metal. Oh, I thought you meant Ice-T when he was in Body Count. Like, yeah,
that was for those only listening. That was Smoke Monster in the chat mentioned that Chris Gaines here looks a little bit like Vanilla Ice when he went new metal. I kind of agree, actually.
Because of the soul patch. That's why. But before I forget, I want to say, okay, so it was no secret that, as you said, that Garth Brooks was Chris Gaines, and it was part of the publicity tour and everything. You know what else it reminds me of? Come on, you think wrestling.
Spinal Tap?
No. Think wrestling. Think TNA. A certain ex-WWE guy who went there and then just decided out of nowhere. I mean, he was a huge guy, and then he decided he wanted to be a different guy. But everyone wanted to make sure you knew that it was this guy being this guy. You got to know.
Oh, my God. Oh, was it Goldust?
No. I'll give you one more guess, and then I'll tell you.
All right. Oh my God! Who was the guy that did? I can't remember his name.
He was part of a tag team, a very successful tag team.
You're gonna have to tell me.
Jeff Hardy, Willow.
Oh, that's right, yeah. Willow. How could I forget about Willow? Okay, we should do a Willow deep dive one day.
Yeah, but for those of you who didn't watch TNA back in like the early to mid 2000s, Jeff Hardy just out of nowhere decided he wanted to be like one of his earlier characters called Willow. And you could tell, like, the company just, like, wasn't into it. So, basically, when he came out, they're like, oh, look, it's Willow, the alter ego of Jeff Hardy. That way you knew it was actually him beneath the mask.
Yeah, because he was wearing a mask.
Right, because nobody knew who Chris Gaines was, despite the huge publicity push.
I will say this. Much like Garth Brooks, I will give Jeff Hardy credit. When he did the Willow character, he would wrestle differently, a different style. He changed his promo style, his whole look. I mean, it wasn't good, but I appreciate the commitment and attention to detail. And there's a lot of detail in this mockumentary for Chris Gaines. I should mention that the movie The Lamb, it was never made because of the poor reception to the album.
I saw that. All right, real quick, I'm going to talk about some of the people who worked on this documentary. There's two directors here mentioned. One, Michael McNamara, and he has directed 11 episodes of Behind the Music, and basically worked on this show called CMT Crossroads, like all the way till current day, and then did a whole bunch of reality TV. And then we've got Christopher Mendel, and he's the director and producer. And really the only other thing he has directed is something called In Search of History. And obviously this was distributed by VH1. And wow, it's so weird that we have an actual cast list for a real life documentary, but we have a couple of actors in this documentary.
That's so strange.
Do you have the list in front of you?
I do. So we've got Garth Brooks. Oh, by the way, first I do want to say Creative KV basically brought his own No Fear shirt of the week in the comments.
What?
And I don't know, maybe it's because I had a little something to smoke earlier, but it cracked me up. Something that he made up. It just said, chatting something funny takes guts. Taking guts takes guts. No fear.
I would wear that. That's good
that
stuff.
Sounds like that might be too good for a No Fear shirt.
I feel really bad
KV
we didn't have one this week now. Oh well.
Yeah, Creative KV says, LOL, love you guys. Protect your guts from the weirdos out there. Thanks, Creative.
Thank you.
KV.
That's good advice.
So the cast. Garth Brooks stars as the aforementioned Chris Gaines. I think everyone knows who he is. We've got Martin Joseph, who plays Tommy Levitz, which is Garth Brooks' best friend who dies tragically. Spoiler alert.
You know, don't forget to mention that it's his ethnically diverse best friend. That's important.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think like that was like they don't make it like a thing.
No, they don't. I mean, I just think it's interesting. Like I wonder if he was like, all right, so how can we make sure, like, this is Garth Brooks talking. It's like, how can we make sure that they don't know that Chris Gaines is me? All right, first off, we've got the Trent Reznor wig and a soul patch, and it's like, they never suspect that I had friends of a different color. Let's do that.
I don't know, man. Garth Brooks has always kind of been known as being,
he's
pretty.
He seems
he's
like
pretty
a
liberal.
very down to earth guy. I'm just joking. God.
Well, I just don't want people to be to think that we're besmirching the good name of Garth Brooks.
He's got so much money, he can make us disappear faster than Chris Gaines himself.
But he wouldn't.
No, he wouldn't. No,
You know why, Steve? Because he's got friends in low places like us. All right.
All right. Do you know any other Garth Brooks song titles? Please work them in. Maybe I'll get the reference.
But I gotta wait to try and work them in.
Okay.
But anyways, so Martin Joseph plays his best friend, who for whatever reason they made his character have his pilot's license at 16 years of age.
Oh man, that was. I mean,
why?
Should we jump into it now? Like, because that was another thing that. See, all right, this is the story that I created for Chris Gaines in my mind, because like basically, what sort of kickstarted this whole deep dive into Chris Gaines was, I think someone posted the trailer for this on TikTok, and I was watching it, and I thought it looked bad and hilarious. So those are the key things we look for here at Obscurity Now. It mentioned that his friend died in a car crash. So immediately in my brain, and I guess it's my writer brain or whatever, I don't know. He's like, oh man, how messed up that Chris Gaines messed up his face in the car crash that also took his friend's life. No. For whatever reason, Tommy here decided he wanted to go for like a midnight jet ride or something and crashed his Cessna like in the middle of nowhere and died. And like, it's just, I mean, shouldn't they have gone the other way? What say you?
I mean, it's kind of like a trope, like a behind the music trope, because a lot of episodes involve somebody like crashing, usually because they're drunk, and it's usually a car.
Right.
But I don't know. It's odd, but like, I feel like everything about Chris Gaines' background and history is odd because everything is so detailed. Like, I mean, like Garth, we already kind of touched on it a little bit. Early in the documentary, they start talking about his parents, which is a very typical thing you would see on Behind the Music. Mm-hmm. And his parents are like, they were Australian.
For no reason.
But then for no reason, his dad was an Olympic swimmer, again, for no reason. Mm-hmm. And then, they moved to LA and they wanted like They wanted Chris Gaines to become a swimmer, or his dad did. There's all this like backstory stuff.
And see, but this is the thing is that, all right, I mean, if he really wanted to try to be different, then I respect that. But like, I feel like it was, I need to create this edgy guy, but without offending as many people as possible. Because I mean, what's like the stereotype of like the controlling dad? Like, where do they usually work or come from?
The South?
No, I was gonna say the military.
Oh, okay.
I mean, isn't that it? Like, usually?
Yeah, sure. The military, the police. Those people.
In the movies, like that's
yeah.
Basically,
no, it's a trope. I get what you're saying. It's a trope.
So, but I don't know. Either Garth Brooks was trying to be different, or he was like, "Ooh, I'll really have a big military fan base. I don't want to offend him. So, who can I offend? Swimmers. Not a lot of swimmers listen to Garth Brooks. So
I genuinely don't think he had any of that stuff in mind, to be honest. I highly doubt it. Mm-hmm. I suspect he was just like trying to think of like, the other reason too why I don't think like country music isn't politicized the way it is now back then in 1999.
Hey, not in this town.
I forgot you're not in a very large town.
No, that's a reference to a song.
Oh, I thought you were referencing "Don't Try That" or "You Can't Try That in a Small Town." That new current controversial. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, all right. Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Continue.
Jesus. Anyway, so because if you listen to country music, even like up to the 90s and early 2000s, it's a lot. It's not like particularly like pro police or pro-military. In fact, there's many songs about like the character in the country song getting the best of the police,
Right. I mean, and that's what I'm saying. I'm saying he created this person, this Chris Gaines, to be as inoffensive as possible, so as many people as possible could, enjoy the music. That's all I'm saying.
I suspect he was not thinking about that at all in 1999. Now, if this was a character that he made up today, maybe he would take some of that stuff into mind, because just the landscape of everything is different. But
sure. All right. Well, who's the rest of this cast?
Anyways, yeah. So Martin Joseph, we're not even past the first guy. Thankfully, there's only like 4, even though there's way more than 4 people in the documentary.
Right.
There's only like 4 listed, and they do have end credits, which at the end of the documentary saying who everybody was played by, but I wasn't gonna deal with all that. But anyways, so this guy Martin Joseph, he probably has like the most interesting and extensive IMDb here. He didn't do a lot of acting, only 9 roles, 2 of them, or one of them being this one. But he is a casting director for What Not to Wear for a little while. Also a casting director for Queer Eye and Pawn Stars. Tackle My Ride, like all this like reality stuff.
Surprised he didn't cast 100 Humans, but I would have met him by then. Yeah.
Well, he was a producer, an assistant producer on one episode of Dr. Phil, and then he was like, "This is too weird for me." And this is coming from somebody who was in Chris Gaines' fake documentary.
Right. Well, he is a fake doctor, so that kind of works out, right?
Yeah. He was also the senior associate producer for 136 episodes of of Judge Karen. I've never even heard of Judge Karen.
Yeah, me either.
But anyways, then we've got Maria Costa playing Maria Costa.
Wow, what a stretch.
She got to keep her name. She doesn't have a lot. She's got like 16 things. I did find it interesting. She, I guess, has like a one-woman show that she wrote called Maria Costa's Macho Men and the Women Who Love Them.
Okay, all right, interesting.
And I didn't watch any of it, but I did read some reviews, and apparently it's very, very good. And she's known as the Latina Lucille Ball.
Wow. Well.
Yeah, who knew? We've got Ted Larkin as the highway patrolman. He's only in one scene. I don't really know why he's credited here.
This guy must be desperate for some credits.
Yeah, I mean, he's still doing stuff. He did something in 2021 called Hot Water, but I know him best as the cop from Unsolved: The Murders of Tupac and Notorious B.I.G. Then we've got Anthony Mindell, who plays Ryan Duffy, who, if I remember correctly, was one of the band members from Crush.
I wonder if he's related to the director/producer over here, Christopher Mindell.
Well, I don't know, but he's mostly a writer and director, mostly shorts that he's written himself also. So has also some producer credits. So yeah, looks like he's still working, but nothing major. And that is the cast that we are going to discuss. But I do have a few. God, I can't believe we haven't even really started talking about We're not going to go beat by beat over the mockumentary because there's too much. I think we're just going to touch on some of our favorite highlights. But I do have a few Chris Gaines facts.
Okay.
Chris Gaines has his own custom Fender guitar.
Oh man. If you would have played that in Estancia, we'd be superstars by now.
I know. So for those that don't know, because we mentioned Estancia a couple of times, that was the band that Steve and I were in together many years ago.
Where we met.
We almost made it to a reality TV show competition on Fuse.
Oh, yeah. That's our only claim to fame.
Yeah. It says, so apparently the Chris Gaines songs are mostly old demos, and again, not written by Garth Brooks. Apparently, Garth Brooks was listening to some of the songs that end up getting used in the early 90s because he knew the guy who wrote them. So Garth Brooks just liked these songs. They were instrumentals. The Chris Gaines project is Trisha Yearwood's favorite Garth Brooks album. And for those that don't know, Trisha Yearwood, famous country music superstar in her own right, and Garth Brooks' wife.
Oh. Would you think she makes them wear the wig, when the doors are closed and they're about to get erotic?
Maybe.
I'm just going to assume yes.
I've had to think so much about Garth Brooks and sex these last 2 days.
That's another weird
we're going to get
thing.
into the addiction that Garth Brooks gave Chris Gaines. So they almost released the Chris Gaines album anonymously. Childish Gambino, a.k.a. Donald Glover, covered Lost in You, the Chris Gaines song.
Yeah.
And those are my Chris Gaines facts.
Wow. Well.
Oh, my God. Smoke Monster wrote in the chat, speaking of when he's going to make love, the wig stays on.
I bet it does. I'm about to get lost in you, baby. But yeah.
Oh, my God. He also wrote, who wants a soul patch ride?
Oh man, nailed it.
If you're only listening, you need to Google some pictures of Chris Gaines. You won't be disappointed.
No, you won't. I'll say, okay, so man, we've already talked about so much, calling his first band Crush, a punk band, was just laughable to me. But yeah, so basically,
and they said that they got together in high school, and Chris Gaines was obsessed with Trevor, who ends up becoming his best friend and bandmate, the guy that flies planes. And as teenagers, they played the Troubadour, Whiskey A Go Go, and a few other places I can't remember. But they have fake flyers that they made up for the show, for those shows, and they did a really good job of making them look like they were flyers from 15, 20 years ago or whatever. So kudos.
Yeah. I mean, the whole production. I mean, as you said earlier, it feels totally legit.
It's excellent.
Yeah,
it's excellent.
It is. Yeah, I mean, if you missed out on Behind the Music, I mean, you should definitely go check it out. But yeah, basically, just like with any Behind the Music documentary, it starts out with highlights, and and this is what drew me to this project, if you will. At the very beginning, they talk about Chris Gaines, and it shows, I think it was his later manager, because Chris Gaines, of course, I guess one of the tropes of being a rock star is that, of course, you have a manager who rips you off or mismanages you. So he had a Karen manager first, and then he had a non-Karen manager second. And he's being interviewed at the beginning, going I went into his room, and he had more women than there are fingers on my hand, or something that.
Yeah. They have all these weird descriptions of whenever they're talking about Chris Gaines' sexual appetite, which is unquenchable.
And yeah, that's the other trope that we briefly touched on, and that usually when you watch these Behind the Musics, especially if it's on the 80s hair metal type, they all get addicted to drugs and alcohol and then have to kick it, and they're resurrected or whatever. I guess Garth Brooks thought that would be too cliche for one Chris Gaines, so instead he's gave him a sex addiction.
I wonder, like, what does this say about Garth Brooks? Like, is Garth Brooks secretly like a sexual deviant? Like
I mean, who wouldn't want to like? And that makes me wonder: is like, is the real Garth Brooks like such like sort of a regular like one woman guy that
he's wholesome. He's very wholesome.
He's a very wholesome guy. So of course, like, I mean, his idea of like an edgy sort of alter ego who's not him is just a guy who just has sex with a lot of girls but doesn't care about drugs and alcohol, I guess.
Yeah, I wonder if he just didn't want to make drugs and alcohol look cool.
Right, see? That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I could see that. Maybe he was concerned about like how that might influence
but
a
sex
younger
addiction, knocking up random girls and possibly getting VD, that's perfectly okay.
That's perfectly fine. Hey man, sometimes the thunder rolls. And lightning strikes.
Are those Garth Brooks?
Yes.
Yeah. Sometimes you just gotta go get lost in a couple of women.
Smoke Monster just basically summed up what I was about to say. Maybe Garth Brooks is Chris Gaines' mask.
See, all right, I was thinking that. All right, if Chris Gaines is the mask, I would say you could run that backwards, and Garth Brooks reminds me of another Garth with a certain last name.
Garth Marenghi.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, sitting there, like listening to Chris Gaines talk reminds me of Garth Marenghi so much. He's got this like faux mysterious voice, and he's always talking about him, how he's, having sex with 31 flavors of girls, and like,
we got to explain that. But since you brought up how he talks, how does Chris Gaines talk?
Oh, he talks he's really low and soft-spoken, kind of like this. And he doesn't really get too excited about things, but he loves telling you that, one time there was a chainsaw on tour. Yeah, there was.
Oh, that's right. So it's super early in the documentary. They're like doing like their cold open, and they're like, oh, he was a crazy musician. Oh, he was addicted to sex. He did this. And he was nuts. And then they cut to a guy. He's like, well, I come over to get ready to pick him up for tour, and I see he's packing a chainsaw.
And then they cut to
Chris Gaines.
That's right. There was a chainsaw on tour. And they never explained why there was a chainsaw on tour.
They never explained it. They never come back to it.
And that cold open is what attracted me to doing this.
Yeah. And I should mention, I've put the link in the chat to the Vimeo version. I think it's on YouTube as well, but from what I remember, the quality on Vimeo was better of the upload. It's like 45 minutes. If you are just listening to this, if you just Google Behind the Life of Chris Gaines, Vimeo, it'll come up. Several options will come up.
You could also, if you really wanted to go take a deep dive, get lost in Chris Gaines, you could also watch, I guess it was an NBC concert special that they did. That is on archive.org. Now, I didn't watch it, but you can if you want to.
But you Gainiacs can.
Right, exactly. But yeah, that's the weird or kind of, I don't know, interesting thing about Chris Gaines is I think he was also sort of, I don't know, tailored to Garth Brooks because he wanted to make sure it was something that he could actually like pull off. Because I think if he really was as outlandish and crazy as they want him to be, he'd have to be like maybe a little more over the top, kind of like a who was the guy who sang for Van Halen, the first singer?
Roth. David Lee Roth.
Like a guy like David Lee Roth, like just really hyper and over the top. But like Garth Brooks, Garth Brooks is here, so he has to make a guy whose energy is like down here.
Yeah. Well, again, he's got friends in low places.
There you go.
But the sex addiction thing, what's interesting is that it comes up every other segment. Yeah. Someone is talking, they're working in that this guy loves to fuck.
Right.
And the flavors thing we should mention. So Randy, one of his bandmates, is interviewed from Crush, and he just I don't even think it's what he's initially talking about. Then he just suddenly throws in, some guys, they can go to an ice cream store and, they like vanilla and that's what they get. They get their flavor that they'd like. Mm-hmm. But Chris Gaines, he's got to try all 32 flavors, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we get it.
Right.
You know what you mean? And then I think though the worst / best sex addict segment is when one of his previous women that he's bedded, and they interview plenty of them. She talks about how, like, one time Chris wanted to have a threesome with me and my sister. And I was like, no way. But my sister, of course, she was up for it. Like, what?
See,
what?
Why is that stuff okay, but drugs and alcohol are not? I mean, as long as you have Chris Gaines kick the habit, like, you know, a little down the line, like, but the funny thing is that he doesn't even really kick the sex addiction habit. It's just at the end.
He does. He gets therapy for it.
Does he?
Yeah, he gets therapy for it because his girlfriend Maria Costa was going to break up with him because he kept banging other women, and he's finally like, okay, all right, I'll get some therapy.
Could you imagine arguing with Chris Gaines as like one of his girlfriends? Like, you walk in and he's under a pile of women. He's like, Chris, what is this? And he's, this is just me, baby. This is Chris Gaines. This is what you signed up for. Like, didn't I tell you? I'm a sex addict. This is what sex addicts do. Well, you want to do some blow? No, Chris Gaines ain't about the blow. He's only about the 31 flavors of women.
Unless I'm the one getting blow.
Yeah.
But the sex addict, and then he talks about how, like, in therapy he learned that the reason why he's addicted is because, you know, he's always been looking for validation and love. Because his father, they say that, like, his mom is interviewed and she says in her Australian accent that I can't remember hearing him say it, but his father must have said that he loved him sometime.
Right. It's
so it's like he's never been told I love you.
Yeah, it's that classic. Yeah, blame daddy.
Yeah, and his dad gets cancer and he dies, and like they never like patched up their relationship. But so another thing that he says about the whole sex addiction thing is that he, oh my god, I just lost my train of thought. He says quite a few things about the sex addiction thing, but basically he couldn't get enough women. I remember. So he has this car accident, and they tell him, Chris Gaines has this car accident, and they tell him that you're never going to be able to play guitar, and we're not even sure if you're ever going to be able to walk again. And then you already know what I'm going to say. And then Chris Gaines says, I knew I was going to be able to walk again. Not playing music. I mean, to be honest with you, I was more afraid of never being able to have sex again.
See, if they would have had more like over the top stuff like that in this, I think it would have been a lot more successful, possibly. But then, see, it's really weird. It's like, it's hard to walk that line. Like, I'm sure he doesn't want Chris Gaines to be a joke. Like, he wants to be taken seriously as a guy who can play another genre besides country. But at the same time, how can you take all this seriously? Like, it's it's a hard.
It's weird because it's so detailed.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this backstory is so detailed. Like, at one point, you mentioned like his manager stabs him in the back. Yeah, it turns out that like somehow, it's not really explained exactly how, but the house that Chris Gaines purchased is somehow actually in the manager's name.
Right. Yeah.
And she was charging him rent somehow because of a contract that they had set up. So I'm guessing like in the payments he got, because when you're a manager you get a certain percentage of their whatever.
Sure.
So I guess like there was some money being taken out for that, and so he has to sue her. But guess who he's been sleeping with? The manager.
Right.
Or as Chris Gaines described it, we had a relationship that it went beyond professionalism.
I felt muscular and compact, like corned beef. I'm just going to start saying Garth Marenghi lines in the Chris Gaines voice. Let's see what Sis here says. Maybe the sex addiction story was because in real life, Garth Brooks was married with several kids for like 20 years. The word on the street is he cheated on his wife with Trisha Yearwood. Ooh.
I refuse to believe that.
He's a wholesome man.
Well, that would be crazy if he did cheat on her, and this is also his wife's favorite album.
Yeah, oh yeah, that would be.
His.
Ooh, the plot thickens.
Maybe.
Like this
Well,
sounds like a plot from my new book, my new horror book.
Another thing too with the whole sex thing is that when he like meets his long-term girlfriend Maria Costa, he keeps like cheating on her, and she like keeps staying with him.
Oh, that doesn't fly in 2023. Like,
well, it makes after your sister Lee said that, it makes you wonder. Is that like, is she a stand-in for Trisha Yearwood?
Yeah, there you go. It's like Chris Gaines is his way of saying Chris Gaines is the straw man that Garth Marenghi, that Garth Brooks created as like an apology to all the other women, or at least to his wife, where he's like, see, baby, there's much worse men than me. Look at this Chris Gaines fella. He's out there having sex with 32 flavors of women.
I do want to touch on a little bit on like the history of Chris Gaines and how they like show it. So like they talk about how he had like all these hits on the Billboard chart, about the number of albums that Crush, his previous band, sold. I think we already mentioned that like his best friend Trevor, he died flying himself to Dallas, where they were going to meet up. And
worst rock and roll death ever. But continue.
Well, it's so weird the detail they go into when they tell that story, because Garth Brooks is like, Chris Gaines is like, I was supposed to fly with him, but I changed my mind. I said, I'll get there some other way. Just promise me, Trevor, you won't fly at night, because I know it's dangerous to fly in the mountains at night.
Right.
Trevor said he promised me that he was going to wait till morning, but he didn't wait.
Yeah, it's like,
he went that night. He didn't wait. It's like, okay. And then like Trevor's mom gives Garth Brooks like a ring, a family ring, to remind him of Trevor. See, like, it's like a family heirloom.
Yeah, see, that to me feels like sort of a Hollywood hackishness, like that. Like, I'm sure that Chris Gaines is mostly Garth Brooks's idea, but I'm sure he probably sat down with like a screenplay writer or two to flesh out the backstory, if you get what I'm saying. With like this ring wrap and
maybe. I mean, from what I read, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's other producers on this, so I'm sure like there was definitely like input and changes, but from what I read, I mean, it's pretty much like his vision for his backstory, pretty much. So yeah, just very, very strange. I should mention, speaking of the Billboard charts, that a song, it might have been Lost in You, but one of the songs from the Chris Gaines, the actual album that got put out, was number 2 on the Billboard Top 200. So he did have like a hit as Chris Gaines. It's just like, because this is Garth Brooks and he's out here selling like 10 million, anytime he puts out an album, they had higher expectations. So that's why they didn't do the movie. But it's crazy because anybody else would have been ecstatic to have 2 million copies sold. But
right. It's like when Transformers 1 came out and it did so well, and then it was like diminishing returns, basically. Yeah, so I got you.
What do you think about Garth Brooks' acting performance as Chris Gaines whenever he's interviewed or whatever?
I mean, he is he's dedicated, for certain. I mean, like I said, I think he sort of created a persona that he could actually pull off. I mean, there's not too much to a Chris Gaines voice. I mean, we've been doing it the whole show. And because he's so low energy, right. Like, and a lot of times he kind of like he very rarely looks directly at the camera, or even when they're doing like the side profile thing, like as if he's talking to somebody that's interviewing him, he never like looks at them. He's always kind of down and dour with his face. He wants to make sure that you think that Chris Gaines is real. I mean, this is all. I'm sure he must have had like an acting coach to help him sell like the idea of Chris Gaines. And I mean, I'm sure they were all like, well, what can we do here? Like, how can we make a character that's different from a Garth Brooks, but then something that's easy enough for him to pull off? Like, that's why he's Australian, because I mean, obviously he can't be from like, I don't know, Russia or I don't know, Southeast Asia or something like that.
Right.
And again, that's also why they moved when he was so young. That way he doesn't have to do an Australian accent. I would love to hear Garth Brooks try to do a Australian accent though. I think it would
be good.
Pretty hilarious. I will say, so I feel like when they first start the documentary, that the shot on Chris Gaines is like really close. You can't really tell what he's like wearing, but then it like pulls back as the documentary goes on. And I swear, doesn't Garth Brooks wear like that same red shirt? Like, isn't that like one of the things that he's sort of synonymous with that Chris Gaines was wearing like towards the end of the documentary? Do you get what I'm talking about?
Not that I can remember. I'm not saying you're wrong. I just don't recall. But something I was gonna say earlier but didn't, is when we were talking about like, who's the mask, Chris Gaines or Garth Brooks, and it's like, well, where does Chris Gaines begin and Garth Brooks end?
No. You know what?
Maybe that was on purpose to have that subtext there.
Garth Brooks should bring Chris Gaines back, and here's how we should do it. He does a buddy cop movie where he has to go undercover as Chris Gaines in the music business to like snuff out, I don't know, some like drug dealers or something like that. And who should be his co-star?
Well, in the movie, Ashley Judd was going to be supposedly like a female fan that was like following him around.
Right.
Which it's too bad that she wasn't. She was, I don't know if you know, but she's in a few episodes of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
I did not know. Like, I don't know. I mean, she's not like
Wesley Crusher's love interest in one of them.
I mean, she's not like the greatest actress or anything. I don't know if I'd be proud of that. But hey, you do you. I
was just pointing it out, sir.
you just want to mention Star Trek. I get it.
Yes, I do. But I do want to say that something I forgot to mention is that "Lost in You," the song that was on the Billboard, almost the top of the Billboard charts, it beat out Destiny's Child's "Bills, Bills, Bills."
Good.
Which is kind of crazy to think about, like on the pop charts, that it beat it out. But and by several spaces, it was only number 9.
And then Garth Brooks was like,
the Destiny Child song.
And Chris Gaines was like, "I'm really sorry, Destiny's Child. Maybe you guys want to come over, and we'll try a couple more flavors." But hopefully they were of age at the time. I don't know. Anyway, I was going to say a few of the more over-the-top things that stood out to me was one of Chris Gaines' solo albums. I think it was like the second or third one. I think it's the one that he did maybe I think it was before his accident, Fornicopia.
Oh yeah, Cornucopia. Yeah, it's a great album.
That is the best
I gotta admit.
ever. Like whoever wrote that, I mean, they really earned their paycheck with that. And see, more stuff like that, and this would have been a lot more entertaining. And then another thing is, and this is obviously after the accident. He's recording in his Malibu mansion, like with his producer, and then they get word that there's California wildfires, which, in case you don't know, that's a pretty common occurrence out here. But it wasn't enough that they were just regular wildfires, started by natural occurrences. They were set by arsonists for some reason. Did you catch that?
Yeah, like why? And he wouldn't like leave the house.
Yeah.
He's like, no, I'm gonna stay here and get.
I want the other side of my face to match. Like I want to get a new face again, a third face. I want to look like that guy from Sugar Ray. He said, or I think it was his friend or producer or whatever. Yeah, then Chris got up there on the roof with his hose to fight the fires, but it wasn't enough. That's cartoon shit. That is like Looney Tunes stuff.
But you know how he ended up blowing the fire away with his music.
Obviously he didn't, because whatever reason they had to burn his house to the ground. Like I don't know. I guess they just wanted more adversity for Chris Gaines to overcome.
Yeah. So Creative KV in the chat had written, speaking of Chris Gaines, and I think he wrote, I don't know anything about the background of this musician, but he looks like the living personification of No Fear
Yeah,
t-shirts.
oh, nailed it. Oh, and I just came up with another a Garth and Garth connection, if you will. It's like, oh, we tried all the positions, on top, on bottom, and doggy. Like,
I did read that there's rumors that Keith Urban, the Australian country music singer, like strongly influenced the character.
oh, was he even
Basically,
a
both Keith.
thing back then at that time?
Oh yeah, yeah. Keith Urban and Keith Urban and Chris Gaines were both born in the same town
Oh,
from
wow.
Australia. Same year, they both signed to the same record label, and obviously they both do similar music.
Both in the band Crush.
And they both have soul patches.
Oh wow, huh? That's really weird. Like to rip, to not, or to borrow from one of your colleagues so specifically. But
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's a coincidence. Seems a little strange, but I also read this great quote from Garth Brooks about it. I mean, I read a few of them, but I really like this one because he like really takes it in stride. That people crapped on this, and he also is. I appreciate that he was earnest in his attempt at doing this whole thing. He said, excuse me, this is from a 2015 interview. Garth Brooks said, "All I can say is my ribs are still sore from getting the shit kicked out of me for doing that," one, referring to Chris Gaines. But I love that record, and I would do it again in a heartbeat, to tell you the truth, because it's all about the music, and I thought the music was fantastic. So
I mean, I like his attitude, and I saw a clip of him on YouTube, and I'm wondering if you caught this. I think he was like on stage talking about, I guess, the upcoming movie, and he was saying that the guy he got to play young Chris Gaines is the same guy who played like young Brad Pitt in 7 Years to Tibet. And he was like, "Oh yeah, gorgeous, gorgeous young kid." And then I said, and after he gets into the car accident, that's when I take over. And he goes, and then wait, I'm not done yet. I'm not done. And then my brother, this is Garth Brooks, like saying for real, talking to the crowd. My brother goes, "Whew, that must have been some car accident."
Okay, that's pretty funny.
And I also think it's funny, and it's also very, I guess, sort of cliche. Did you ever see the Weird Al, the new Weird Al biopic that Daniel Radcliffe did?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
The whole joke is that when there's a biopic about like a musician or a celebrity, they always pick like the hottest like person to play young them. And Garth Brooks did the same thing, apparently.
That's pretty funny. Smoke Monster, this is like, we were saying after I read the quote where he's like, it's all about the music. Smoke Monster wrote, it's kind of not about the music, though, from the sound of it.
No, I agree with Smoke Monster. Like again, from the look of Chris Gaines, I assumed that he was going to sound like Creed or something like that. Maybe sort of more of like the harder alternative music of the time. No. He does not sound like that at all, as we said.
I mean, I get Garth, obviously wanted to put out an album on music that he enjoyed, but I almost think it would have been more successful or more interesting if he had done a genre that's like so completely out of left, like metal or something.
That is what I'm saying. Like he didn't go far enough with Chris Gaines. Like
with the music part.
Right, with the music.
The backstory, you could argue he went a little too far.
I mean, I would say still not. I mean, I would say he went into interesting directions with the backstory, for sure. But yeah, like if he would have gone full into like a full-on genre, because I mean, pop is pop. That's why it's called pop. It's not like a real genre. If it was like, real like hard rock or even like the alternative at the time, or like you said, metal or actual like punk, like that would have been really interesting. If like his song or his like lyric content was really over the top, like that would have been something that I would have gravitated to. I don't know. I think maybe if he would have picked a side, then perhaps it would have gone a little bit further. But hey, he's still, like you said, what was it, #1 on the Billboard, or
number 2 on the pop Billboard chart. The Billboard 200, top 200 pop.
And sadly, Chris Gaines went further than you and I ever did. So
very, very true. Very true. In fact, I don't know if you came across this in your research, but in 2019, Steve, I don't know. Well, maybe you attended. I don't know what you were doing in 2019, but the first Gaines Fest happened. It was called Gaines.
Oh,
I'm not
Gaines
kidding.
Fest?
I'm putting a link. I'm putting a link to the Facebook event page. It's in the chat. It was called Gaines Fest 2019, a celebration of the life of Chris Gaines.
Man, how many hipsters attended that? Ironically, I wonder.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about what they wrote here. Please join us for an evening in celebration of the 20-year anniversary of the album release. The festivities include a Chris Gaines lookalike contest, a Chris Gaines tribute band, which is funny because Garth Brooks is a Chris Gaines tribute band himself. Right. Art for sale inspired by Chris Gaines. Man. And then and more. So yeah, it was held in Nashville at a bar called the Cobra Nashville, which is a pretty cool bar name.
Run by the Cobra Commander, of course, and
yes, of course. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I think we pretty much hit on all the big beats for Chris Gaines. He eventually ends up, kicking his sex addiction, and he stays with Maria Costa. They're happily ever after. And yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but they end with him talking about how he's got a new album coming out.
The Lamb was the Lamb,
right,
because this whole thing is basically just publicity for the movie that never came out, that never was.
Yeah. The only other thing I have to mention is that I did come across a video of him performing somewhere as Chris. I'm sorry, there is one beat from the mockumentary I do want to mention. So after his accident, Chris Gaines teaches, he goes through rehab, physical rehab, gets himself walking again, has to teach himself how to play guitar from scratch again. And then when he starts writing his new music, he basically starts driving across the country, just finding little dive bars to play in, unannounced.
And he ends up in
writing these new songs.
Mississippi Delta.
Right. Yeah. All these places. And then when he comes back, he's got like a new album of music. And he's like, when I came back with my music, I brought something back nobody expected. I brought back soul. and basically they say that like his new album is like R&B inspired, or I'm sorry, he made a new album that was R&B inspired. It was a big hit, critical hit, multiple times platinum. And then I think is when they go into like how his next album is going to be The Lamb or whatever.
Right. Oh yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I laughed. I died when he said that. That was. I think we pretty much hit it all. But man, I'm really. How long do you think AI will become advanced enough to where it will? Someone could go into a prompt and be like, "Hey, ChatGPT. Make me the Life Behind Chris Gaines like movie that we never got to see." Chris Gaines is such an interesting artist, Steve. I don't know that AI can replicate
there
him.
is any imitating. Yeah. The only AI that can replicate him is Garth Brooks himself.
Are you saying Garth Brooks is a robot?
No, he's the only intelligence capable.
Wow. All right, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I dig it.
Yeah. Sorry, I misspoke. But yeah, should we render a verdict?
Yeah, let's do this. All right, so here we go.
Remembered or overrated? That's the question.
All right, so Yahel Gaines. Do you think that I guess let's just say, do you think that Chris Gaines should be remembered for all of human history, or tossed into the black void of obscurity where there is no soul for all eternity?
Just a patch of hair.
Just a soul.
So whether we're talking about Chris Gaines or specifically the Behind the Music documentary, I say he should be remembered. I gotta be honest, this is one of my favorite things that we've ever watched.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
It was so ridiculous. ridiculous. Like now, if it was like on a real person, I'd be like, oh, okay, it was your average behind the music or whatever. Interesting, but nothing crazy. But just knowing that like this is just Garth Brooks just being like, I want to do something real weird, and really committing to it, and everybody for the most part that's interviewed puts in like a very believable performance. Um, I honestly like there's only a couple times watching it where I was like, oh, Chris Gaines looks like Garth Brooks here. Like he does a good job between the lighting and the way he tilts his head of not looking like Garth Brooks. And yeah, I think it's very believable. And I was stone cold sober watching this. And it's hilarious because it's so ridiculous. Like just when you think there can't be more detail, there's more detail. Just when you think you're done hearing about Chris Gaines' sex life, you're not.
Okay, so that's a remembered for you.
It's a very strong remembered for me.
Well, I want you to know that I was sampling 31 flavors of women when I was watching this. No,
it's 32.
No, that's not true at all. Oh man, I think you liked this way more than I did. I was bored in places. I mean, I couldn't believe. I mean, I can and can't believe. I was like, wow, some people really put in a lot of work, and they definitely put some money behind this like completely fake idea. Which
it was
in
fascinating.
and of itself is fascinating. But I was bored, and the thing that really like if they would have had more over the top stuff, then I could probably give it a remembered. But the thing that really killed me was just how awful the music was. Like,
oh yeah, the music's so like meh.
It's so generic. Yeah. So I mean, but I will say that I didn't hate it. I'm glad that we watched it because I never would have watched it otherwise if it wasn't for us doing this show. So I think it deserves a very positive stalemate. So here we go. Here's the stalemate.
It's just in, those pathetic podcasters known as Obscurity Now have once again rendered a verdict of no contest. That's right, a stalemate. They've wasted everyone's time. They are just as lazy as Congress and twice as corrupt. Boo, I say, tar and feather 'em. Get out the guillotine. Boo to stalemate, and boo to Obscurity Now.
Okay, wow. Well, whew, man, I can't believe we're talking about Chris Gaines, or talked about Chris Gaines in 2023. We're really doing the world a service here, eh, pal?
Absolutely. By the way, Smoke Monster complimented you. He said, nice newspaper spin.
Oh, thank you.
I actually, it's funny, like the stalemate bumper is like my favorite of the three bumpers, just because it's like, they wasted your time.
Well, I really hope that you don't feel that way, listeners and viewers. But anything else to add before we sign off here, Mr. Gaines?
No. I mean, hey, if somebody has 45 minutes or you want something on in the background that you could occasionally
laugh at,
pay a little attention to and laugh at, I mean, you'll get it from here. I thought, like, I do agree with you that the story itself, it's a very pedestrian behind the music, but because it's all fake and everyone commits to it so hard, like I just found it fascinating. Like from a production standpoint, we didn't really. I know I mentioned it a little bit, but we didn't get into like how many pictures there are of Chris Gaines, like from concerts, behind the scenes stuff that supposedly happened. Right. I mean, I would say over 100 easily.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely gave. I'm sure they just threw a bunch of money at the behind the music people, and they're like, "Look, just treat this guy like he was real, and if you need something, then you just go ahead and create it."
Yeah, they made like several like music videos that they only show clips of from a few seconds from songs, but I mean, there's like sets built and stuff. Like at one point, he's like walking through. Although this might be like a real music video that they actually released. He's walking through like almost like a hallway full of CRT TVs, and they're super stacked high. And so yeah, I mean, I just found it really fascinating, both from a just that Garth Brooks did this, the level of commitment and the level of production and time and attention to detail. Like I thought it was.
I'm sure, yeah, he was obviously willing to make this thing work, even if it meant doing a fake documentary. There's another similar sort of behind the music, if you're into like the mockumentary style, where an episode of The Simpsons was called Behind the Laughter, and it's treated exactly the same way as a Behind the Music or Behind the Life of Chris Gaines, and it is hilarious, as you might imagine. But yeah, like as I said, I didn't completely hate it. It deserves a very positive stalemate, and I can't believe there was a Chris Gaines Fest in 2019. If you and I
look at what COVID took from us.
Like if we ever start making music again, we'll cover a Chris Gaines. Well, it's not a Chris Gaines song; it's whoever's he's ripping off. But sure, we'll cover one. But yeah, I think anything else to add, Mr. Velasquez Gaines?
No. I think we've covered it quite nicely, Steve. I think it's ready. It's time for us to get out of here.
All right. Well, thank you all for listening. I forgot to mention at the top of the show, but if you made it this far, please subscribe. Obviously, it will help create awareness of Chris Gaines and all the other weird crap that we talk about, and it would help us out a lot. And stay tuned for a trailer for my comic book, Escape to Earth, where you can buy both issues on the Reptilian Media Store. There's a link in the description. Otherwise, we will see you next Sunday, where we will continue to discuss even more obscure media, only on Obscurity Now. See you next week. I'm having a weird day. The name's Adam. Where I'm from, I'm known as the Zero Thief. Depending on who you ask, some might say I'm the best thief. But believe it or not, even the best screws up every once in a while, and that's what I did, and I had to make a fast getaway. I ended up crash landing on this bizarre planet. Turns out, I didn't get away fast enough. These winged freaks followed me here.
It's just us here, Zero Thief, on this empty backwoods planet. So start talking, either to me or my blade.
Okay, I do have something to tell you. It's about the planet. It's not that empty. Come on, man. I thought you were gonna die. Loose. Cut me loose. Behind you. Whoa. Thought I was done for. It was gonna be a light snack for a snarling creature. But then, she showed up, riding on the back of one of those monsters like it was nothing. And with a wave of her hand, the other razor-toothed beast just stomped away. I'd never seen anyone like her before in my life. I thought I'd say something clever. Thanks, have you seen my ship? She gave me a look that said more than words ever could, because I think she was trying to read my mind or something. And from there, things just got even weirder. Escape to Earth. 36 pages of insane dinosaur action. Issue 1 available now at reptilianmedia.bigcartel.com. Featuring a variant cover by Sean Forney. Act now while supplies last. You've been enjoying Obscurity Now, a podcast that's recorded live to tape and streamed to Twitch and YouTube. Subscribe so you never miss an episode or hilarious quip. Take us with you by following the download links provided in the show notes to wherever you get podcasts. And take notice of our various social media links. If that's what you're into, I'm not here to judge. And make sure you join us live next week at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific as we continue to discuss more obscure media only on Obscurity Now.